Alex Ansary here, March 19th, 2016, coming to you from just outside Taos, New Mexico, somewhere out there at an amazing rural location. Try not to focus on the Wizard of the Oz, the man behind the curtain, the chemtrails behind me, and understand that you are still going to get a conscious, well thought out video on the nature of reality, even though we have evidence of geoengineering around us. And it's actually been very interesting to stay where I'm staying over the course of, I've been here about 11 days, and I'm speaking freely at the moment because nobody's on the property. However, there are neighbors around. It is difficult for me to make videos on a continuous basis, because even if people are friendly and invite me to some of their properties and whatnot, the depth of the conversation that I involve myself in when it comes to this archonic interference over human relationships, human affairs, when you're on that path in life, it's really better to have more space around you so you can speak freely. It doesn't matter how much you protect yourself. There's going to be certain energy backlash that comes from people that are still programmed by the system. So there's a number of things that I'm going to bring up in this video. It was also said by a local that, is somewhat aware of the programming over society. He feels that there's a certain amount of, like the natural backdrop that exists. I have a dog barking. There's always some sort of distraction when I try to go into certain types of topics. So even though everybody's gone, the dog's going mad to kind of derail the focus. And so this person shared a perspective that here in Taos, and you can even say maybe southern Colorado, there's like what do you call it, spiritual protection or psychic protection. I'm not saying for everyone, for those that are tapped into that frequency. Okay, because everybody experiences this reality in a very different way. Keep that in your knowledge and understanding. People are experiencing this reality in different ways. The solar flares are affecting humanity and the trends within human society. How that expresses itself is beholden to the level of consciousness of that particular individual. It's like a blender blending things up. This came to me last week. If there is rubber in the blender, the very act of the blending, i.e. the solar flares, the heating up, the mixing of energies, isn't to blame, but it is the factor that has accelerated the blending of those very things. The question is, why is the rubber in the blender to begin with? Why has this person not chosen to be responsible to remove those aspects of themselves in the blender, if you will, representing the human body and all the emotions in the body and all the thoughts in the body, being all the ingredients in that blender? They're responsible for why that rubber is in their body. All the sun is doing is acting as the blender, the accelerator, the blending of what's already there, the bringing to the surface. The sun isn't to blame, but the sun is a conduit, and we are transmitter and receivers. And the sun is like the hitting of our button, as our buttons and pictures are lit up. Having said that, I now conclude, and I can hear when other people talk about, when they talk about the increase in psychic penetration, psychic attack, archonic or other interference in human relationships, they talk about things kicking off around 5 years ago. Some say 6 years. Some might say the last few years. Some might say just this year or just in the last few years. But there's a lot of people that will say they've been noticing this in their own lives around 5 years ago. And I've given you my story about seeing Portland change around 2010 and 2011. And since I put out my Archon podcast series, I've had a lot of people write to me, and I don't get back to everybody. And I understand there's a lot of people out there that are having these interference issues. And I do appreciate the reports that people do forward to me, because it does help me see how widespread this issue is. And people reporting that they're seeing things in the same timeline as in, the last 4 to 6 years, an increase in problems in their relationships. A lot of men reporting a lot of the strange behavior in the opposite sex in females in today's world, and how things have definitely changed in recent years. The things that we see in the behavior and thinking process in the last few years, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, in some cases, things really were different. And, of course, there's a certain amount of men in today's day and age that are fully sucked into this world of computers and virtual reality, that are very out of touch with their own sacred masculine. And, they resemble androids more than actual men. There are so many of them as well. So there is a male and female version of the cloned archetype that is easily controlled by the system. And in addition to the conversation of more people waking up to the fact that something is interfering with our reality, you have more people questioning their dreams. And there are many that have involved themselves in the New Age movement that have been taking cues from their dreams. And now there's more of a discussion taking place with the topic of dream implants or dream invasions, simulated realities, virtual realities. And in just the last few days, I've had a number of experiences that I would consider unusual in the dream realm, where it is clear that what I was receiving in the dream was not pure light or information. Actually, in one of them, it was my grandmother showing me images that already exist in my own mind of the farmhouse in Aurora, Oregon that I lived on as a young boy. So there's a certain amount of emotions that are tied to that particular place. My grandfather and grandmother sold the property when they went through a divorce in the early 1990s. And so, part of my story does involve, like a lot of people older than I, at least I guess I am fortunate that in my young years, in my short time that I've spent on this earth, I'm now 36, for a certain period of that time, I was able to live on a farm on 40 acres in a rural part of America. And not everybody gets to experience that. Some people are born literally in the city. I was born in the city, but they literally live their whole lives, their whole childhoods in an urban environment. And I don't think that's healthy. So I think that is a positive thing that I was able to experience. And so I consider the year of 1993 to represent a very important chapter in my own life that also represents the chapters that many other people have lived. And it's the death of the family, the end of the farm, and the beginning of the independent, lost family members living their lives, renting something they'll never own in the city. This is a story, and it's very emotional. There's a lot of emotions tied to the death of the family farm and the beginning of slavery. The slavery of the family members that don't have wealth themselves, that are sucked into this whole fantasy of living in the city and renting in these popular neighborhoods and becoming a hamster on a wheel. There are many Americans that have been moved by this archonic energy from the rural, natural connection to nature, and they're in the cities. They're giving their energy away. Their consciousness is adulterated from this experience of being a slave to the mighty dollar. And some of them are energy vampires on a planet where it seems that there are a lot of vampire souls that are here to evolve and grow and find another way to their vampire nature. There are some people that are drawn to the idea of, hey, let's all move in this one neighborhood and gentrify it to the next level, where you see apartments for $2,500 and $3,000 in Portland, in New York, in parts of Austin. That's not normal. That's a special kind of psychology, I believe, where people enjoy the have and have not realities when they're on the side of the have, when it's working for them. And so I see, for example, some of the people that move to Portland as being like vampire souls that enjoy their little materialistic position in the world. And they enjoy feeding on the earth energies of a particular area instead of having their own energy and taking the energy somewhere else and helping make the world a better place. For others, not just being self-serving, going to a particular part of the planet because it feels good there, because they feel that they can create more for themselves there. And that's what a lot of urban environments are. Especially when you have social engineering and gender warfare and young, pretty women with, the bodies, the physical bodies, surpassing careers-wise, especially in this day and age, with the discrimination taking place, especially of the older male worker, of which I've talked about at great length on this channel, that is energy vampirism. And so, the story of the death of the family and the death of the farm way of life, the rural way of life, and 90% of the population being in the cities and 10% being in rural areas. And by the way, China is also trying to create that same ratio with their own Agenda 21 policies, where you have forced migration of rural Chinese into urban areas. This is happening concurrent to what is happening in our own society. There's actually a lot more articles you can read about it online, which shows the global nature of this social engineering. You can also see Russia following in suit as well. So I had some dreams in which it seemed like my grandmother was showing me those pictures of the farmland, and maybe it really was her reaching out. But it did seem to be, in the dream, that there was some sort of encouragement to return back to that place, in a literal sense. Now, as beautiful as that experience may have been, and that whole rant I gave about, the beauty of connection to nature versus being stuck in the city, that place is no more. That property is owned by other people. The idea or concept of returning to Oregon, when Oregon has already been overtaken by Californians and people from other states, and we're seeing the urban sprawl out of the Portland area. I've now returned several times to Portland. And I could see how some people have moved to Portland that were told by these orbs and these light ETs to go to Portland and raise its consciousness. There's obviously a love bite, to coin a term from Eve Lorgan, who writes about Dark Cupid, Archon, alien interference in human relationships. What about people having a love bite to literally go to an energy harvesting center, a place like Portland, Oregon, where you have most of the population involved in energy vampirism, either vampiring on others or having their energy vampired on. By the way, when you're paying high dollar rents and paying the rent, that part of this matrix changes you. Yeah, you're having your energy vampired on. So a lot of Portlanders today and people in places like that are having their energies vampired on by living in the rent trap matrix. They don't realize it. They don't realize how it changes their thoughts, how it changes how they view people that they may or may not involve themselves in a relationship. But it does. The energy vampirism that they are going through has consequences that they have yet to identify, that their ego has yet to actually discover, because, their ego is invested in, oh no, they're an enlightened god or goddess. Yes, they can create their reality. They can do anything. They aren't living a lie. They aren't having their own energies vampired on. They aren't vampiring on other people's energies. They're an enlightened little princess or prince. And it's the ego trap. That today's man or woman, Westerner, maybe even Asian, and this is definitely not limited to our culture, the constant self-flattery. It's one thing to have confidence in yourself, but the confident blind, the overly confident, Obama/Trump style of confidence is one way of putting it. The bullshitter, the bullshit artist. That is not the way towards higher consciousness. So with a lot of these people, they've been citing things that they have gotten out of their dreams. And there are certain people that have been promising in our society this collective evolution to spaceships or collective evolution of consciousness, to the point where those that have gotten up to a certain point, when the cataclysms come, they will be beamed up to the Ashtar Command Central, very similar to the Christian rapture. And what you don't have is enough people that are going beyond their own ego and realizing, hey, I got wrapped up in some serious bullshit, whether it be websites, fake channelers. And again, we're talking about a mass of human beings leading up into 2012 in our society. Some of you may have been involved in that. You may have known some people that have involved themselves in the New Age movement that have been putting down some of your warnings about the future. It's easy to spot them out. I, of course, was raised within a single mother household where there was a lot of use of the New Age theology that was turned into a dogmatic religion within the household, used to control, used to tell me I am negative, and literally continuing into my adulthood. And that's why I've actually been thinking about the definition of the term spiritual abuse. And that is when you have parents abusing their children that are under an iconic or religious spell themselves, that are telling their child, you're not enlightened or you're not on the spiritual path because my belief system and my false teachings and light say so. I control you, I correct you. And so, looking back at the actual way I was raised, in a literal sense, combined with my mother's deluded spiritual New Age teachings, which were far from the true light, and seemed to have more with grays, aliens, fake channeling, bringing in energies that you know nothing about, claiming that they are of the light. And we're talking about bullshit artists, entities that will actually tell people that my mother would listen to that the dark beings have been removed from the planet. They're gone now. And this would be fake salvation, more fake enlightenment, more fake promises that the earth is being cleared up of all that stuff, and we're about to celebrate as if we're now living in that conscious world, with people continuing to be bombed in the Middle East and these plans for World War III, and obviously what's been happening with the gender war, the divide between man and woman. How is that a collective shift in consciousness? In reality, what we have is a New Age movement or some sort of a sophisticated mind control system where you have countless people channeling fake messages for decades upon decades that this point in time would be the shift towards the positive. And when we see that the truth is actual and inverted 180, and we see more people asleep now than ever, even though they have access to information and unique opinions on their smartphones, instead, people are using, the masses are using technology as some form of entertainment and connecting the tube up to the matrix. And people talk about building virtual realities. And you look at the genuine anarchy of information on the internet and fake news, and you see how many people fall for that fake news, and you get a grasp for how intuitive people actually are. Intuition for a lot of people in the conspiracy research community is in the fucking toilet. Excuse my language. Look at this Trump support. Look at this blind support for Putin. Look at how many people don't realize or feel that they are also actors in this conspiracy. Look at the spell that they are under. Maybe you yourself are under some form of a spell that Donald Trump is not influenced by the Archonic system. I know someone that actually studies Archon, solar flares, and his Facebook pic is Donald Trump. Even if people are able to grasp some of these complex concepts, like the Archonic influence over human consciousness, and how that also connects with increased solar flares, or the concept of a staged World War III. Look at how many people have involved themselves in genuine research the last decade or few decades that are all about Trump, or Sanders for that matter, but they usually lean towards the Trump. And on another angle, why even waste time thinking that Gary Johnson with a 5% vote would change the system? Why are people not trying to awaken themselves? And it is time that they wake from the dream, because it's a simulation. And this reality is a simulation. But going back to dreams, there's a lot of people that have been programmed by implants in their dreams. Things that have actually controlled their decision making when it comes to relationships, significant others, important decisions, where to move. Because many people have fallen for the Archon trap of just believing what's in your dream and assuming that it's spiritual, when in many cases it's an artificial virtual reality that you and I are put into to have our energies, emotions harvested when those artificial simulations come up. Just last night, again, I was in that old home in Aurora on the farm. And there was another person there that in this real life I've known to be very much controlled. Her thoughts from knowing this person and her addiction to painkillers, pharmaceuticals, antidepressants, just that whole world. And a couple manipulations that I can recall, but it's not significant enough to repeat here. But it was significant enough at the time to realize that it was sabotage energy. And in this dream, this is the second time in a month. One of the things going on in the plot, in the dream itself, is a home invasion. And a few weeks ago, it happened. It was a couple teenagers, mixed race group of teenagers. And it was a situation where I'm having to stand up for this female and tell these entities to get out of her home. And this was when I was staying at a female's property in New Mexico. I was doing my Archon podcast series then, or continuing the thoughts, because that is a power center place that I have identified here in the Southwest. When I visit that woman's place, I feel very centered, and I feel like this is, somewhat of a sister spiritually, which is why I think that we're friends. So in that dream, while at her place, I was in a simulation where I was telling those entities to leave her place. And it was a victorious feeling, because they did. However, last night, the entities are back, and I'm in the old Aurora home, and these guys are bigger than the last group of teenagers, teenage punks and thugs. Something was slightly more intimidating. And I remember telling this person, have you called 911? There's a home invasion underway right now. And this person going, yes, or I don't know. Or basically, playing games like she did in the real world, which created a sense of helplessness and frustration. Because in the dream, there's an actual threat. And a lot of people are targeted with threats. And that's why a lot of humans are actually kept in line in the physical world, is because they've actually been threatened subconsciously in ways they don't even remember consciously in the dream realm. I also believe that my mother was heavily targeted simply for bringing me into the earth. I do believe that. Whether she knows that or not, I don't know. But there was definitely a very concerted effort on the part of the Archons to separate my mother and I, and to program her with a whole encyclopedia database of everything that was wrong with her son. She doesn't realize this. She's still too unconscious to realize this, that she's been a targeted individual who has been programmed since she was in her 20s to view the baby boy, the baby bear, as she used to call me a long time ago, as something inferior spiritually, something to be corrected, for her to not have the ability to understand her own possession during the 1980s, obsessed with correcting my own divine, natural, Alex Ansary way of being. And she's shown me in so many ways, to be tapped out of a basic intuition, compassion for the people of the Middle East, or to know the truth about 9/11. And she, since, the last period, has been into a lot of mainstream ways of viewing things that most of us would consider to be insane. I'll never forget in 2010 her asking me, Alex, why don't you like Lady Gaga? Or what's your issue with Lady Gaga? When, back then it was obvious to see that she was sexualizing the youth in a worship Baphomet kind of way. Do a sexy dance with a group of 10 guys, sweaty guys. Just because some adult women are turned on by that stuff, why is it they have an inability to see how some of the stuff is targeting the youth, to brainwash people, the dark side of sex magic? So in more than a few ways, my mother has shown me to be clueless and abusive, and how the New Age teachings, many of them, are used to control human beings in conjunction with the dream implants. Now, I've talked in a past video about something called the psychic attack false flag, where women, for example, or men, or anyone, can be targeted in their dream realm, and certain images will be projected in that dream to convince the person being attacked that another human being is literally coming into their dreams and invading their space. So, for example, you could be having a dream about a certain person, and that person's chasing you, and that person is hurting you, or that person is telepathically, psychically attacking you, and that person can be completely innocent of any wrongdoing. But there could be some sort of an interference that is there to prevent you and that person from actually being friends. Many people that I've known, I believe, have been I have been isolated from due to the psychic attack false flag paradigm. Now the wind kicking up, hopefully the recording is still clear on an audio note. And having some people report back to me, if they're having dreams. For example, I remember someone that was dating briefly, having dreams that I actually had another girlfriend, that I was involved in a relationship. All she interpreted from that dream was some sort of a female entity or being came to her and said, "He is mine," or "He is my property." That was the dream that she was getting. And it's also possible that, certain entities that have been involved in targeting and harassing me for multiple years. It is not outside the realm of possibility that they have literally overtly gone out and threatened people close to me that are vulnerable to dream hijack. I've actually been told also by another former roommate, older woman, not girlfriend, but roommate, rented a room from her in 2010. She had a dream that there was a team of 15 doctors, observers, or scientists being led around by a woman with a clipboard that were following me around and recording my every action into some sort of a database. And this was happening spiritually. Somebody can interpret that as a guardian angel. Another person can interpret that as another person can interpret that an entirely different way. And I do. So what I know for real is that in the last week, and I've also been talking with another person here on the property that has an open mind to the point where they, in their own words, can describe some of the very stuff that I'm describing to you, which is a very interesting spark when two individuals meet randomly along the way and they both understand. They can finish each other's sentences. They're literally coming up with the same sentences, ideas, and using the same words at the same time. It's synchronized. And that's something that I've been experiencing with this individual that you've heard me already talk with for an hour and a half about today's world and society. That is a very powerful thing, and it's a lot of validation. And I said to him multiple times, we are coming up with some of the same ideas at the same time. It's like we're tapping into the zeitgeist. And we're here, mean at the same time, to jump to the next level in our own evolution and spiritual development. There's not an accident why we've met, why we're sharing these concepts, discussing the geoengineering effect over human consciousness, discussing the nature of consciousness and the increase in archonic interference in our lives and relationships, discussions about meditation and proactive solution-based behavior and thinking to evolve beyond those artificial, yet weak, feeble, yet powerful, yet weak. It's all in how you look at it. And if you're able to turn the tables, like a kung fu move, a shift, a redirection of the energy, getting out of the way. What does it mean to get out of the way of the incoming attack? Using martial arts as an analogy. How does this dovetail with our understanding of spiritual kung fu when it comes to dealing with some of these forces? So realizing that some of these dreams are virtual realities in the astral plane. And I can now say that I have met people that have made bold claims of traveling through all the astral planes of reality. One person comes to mind that I knew as a young person. He comes to mind a lot. He would talk about mastering the astral planes and being a master of all these things. And as I started outside the box in the late 2000s, seeing this person more and more as a bullshitter. Like others, I have had many teachers that have taught me certain things. There was the man that I learned how to punch through, how to defend myself, circular motion, some of the stuff that I demonstrate on video. But he only took me to a certain point. And since then, and especially lately, I've been evolving my own style. And realizing, for example, and really feeling it. There's something about this time and day that we're in maybe it's a solar flares, but the real martial artist developing his own style and not becoming another copycat doing a fixed kata, but literally learning how to move for himself or herself. Moving on to a meditation example. Someone else teaching me the basics of grounding and self-clearing and bringing in a gold sun, as I've already talked about in previous videos, bringing in our own energy. But then also seeing how there is only so much to learn from certain people, and sometimes people teach things that aren't really very applicable to other people. They may have their own rites and rituals in ways that they covet important information for whatever reason, and games that people play, ways that people try to manipulate the energies that in some cases of their students. And so, having seen several versions of this, where people that have taught me amazing things that I also feel called to pass on to others, in each of these disciplines, there's take what is relevant and leave what is not relevant. And I can definitely see a consistent pattern with men that have taught me important things, also having their own baggage, or what I would call the less light or aware side, that I have had to filter out with each of these teachers. I have had to filter out. Not to mention some of the people that have influenced me in the alternative media that I have since come to speak against. And so, as it is with many things in the world, we take what is relevant and we leave the rest. This video has primarily, though, focused around the need to filter out our own perceptions. And to understand that in the dream realm, there are emotions that can easily be harvested when we're in a false reality and we're thinking that that is a real reality. And so, as they say with G.I. Joe, knowing is half the battle. As it is with that, knowing that there is such a thing as some form of artificial or non-human interference in human affairs, that is not necessarily taking a position of powerlessness. On the contrary, once someone comes to terms with the fact that there is interference and that some of these forces that are involved in interfering with us aren't necessarily outside of ourselves, sometimes they are within ourselves. You've also heard me use the term inner archon, as I think some people have an inner controller. It's tied to our DNA and the fact that we're in human form. And so it is actually self-responsibility when someone begins a process of wanting to see things as they are and to empower themselves and to identify with such concepts of being insusceptible, not able to be easily influenced, to be tapped into one's own thoughts, to be able to literally use meditation to ground oneself and filter out false teachings, false lights, false images, false teachers, and to go about a way of life of speaking the truth regardless of how society or the peer pressure control structures will actually treat someone. These are things that I think are things worth pursuing, that are overall missing from the perspectives shared today in the alternative media, and in many cases the perspectives shared in the so-called spiritual community. And I think that this is a topic that I'm going to come back to. There's obviously a lot of traveling that I've been doing, and there's obviously a fair amount of energetic backlash that I've also experienced following the completion of these thoughts that I share on YouTube. And it is not easy to go through, but it is something that I feel I need to do to continue the dialogue where I go, however long the video goes on, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, from each of these places that I visited, including Portland, including the San Luis Valley, Costilla County, including here in Taos. The environment in some ways influences the content. And for the first week of being here in Taos, it was actually difficult for me to make a video. I felt like, my consciousness was in a state of shift. But now that I've been here several weeks or 11 days, and now this camera's about to die, I'm going to wrap this up. Lately, it's been a little easier for me to get some of these thoughts out. And in the next video, we'll go deeper down the rabbit hole into this conversation. For now, I'm Alex Hansary signing off for March 19th. It's now spring 2016. Signing off from Taos, New Mexico.